Hello YouTube friends, Ben Ochart here. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today I want to talk with you about the best filter for the type of aquarium that you're going to be setting up. And let's go ahead and just get right into it. If you're new to this channel and you like to always be learning about fish keeping like me, go ahead and hit that sub button and hit that bell. That way you'll get notifications when I upload new content and when I'm going to go live, for example, on Saturdays at 10 a.m. Pacific for the Cichlids and Coffee live stream. It has cichlids in the name, but we get into all types of fish keeping ideas. So let's get into today's subject, and let's start first by looking at different types of filters and realizing that really all filters are doing is removing water from the tank and straining it or filtering or polishing it through something like sponges or media. That's all that's going on, regardless of the filter. Even if it's not being removed from the tank, like in the case of a sponge filter, you're still getting the same thing. You're essentially running the water through something that's going to do something to that water. Usually remove particles. Here, this right here is a canister. This is a canister filter, and it's pulling water from the tank, running it through the different trays and the different things that are in the canister. Could be all sponges, could be a combination of sponges and beneficial bacteria, media, like rings or things of that nature, Biohome or Marine Pure, things like that, or it could be all sponges really, or maybe some chemical filtration like ChemiPure or Purigen. These are all things that you can throw into a canister. This is a hang-on back. You could put different kinds of media in a hang-on back as well. Beneficial bacteria media, you could put sponges, you could put a variety of things depending on the size of the hang-on back. And you can see here, this is a sponge filter that is over the intake of one of my filters, and that gives me the benefits of like having a sponge filter in the aquarium without really having a sponge filter in the aquarium. So I'm getting some good buildup on the sponge, and when fish food gets caught on the filter, instead of being sucked into the filter, it stays on the surface of the sponge and is picked off by the fish. So, and this here, this filter is probably the king of filters. You see it a lot in saltwater applications or in larger tanks, and it's called a sump system. Again, all you're doing is taking your aquarium water and running it through something, and then returning that aquarium water in a condition that's better than when it first ran through that filter, whether it's an HOB, hang-on back, canister, or sump. It's all the same thing. So the question you have to ask yourself is, how much of that activity do I need going on? How much do I need to be running that water through the sponges, through the media, before it comes out the other? How many times do I want that to occur? And that very often is determined by your gallons per hour. So my first tip for you, and I have several tips, and including one at the end that is going to be something that if I could add to the end of all of my videos that I've posted, the hundreds of videos, I would go back and add it right now. So stay tuned for that at the end of today's video. But gallons per hour, how many times is the total volume of your tank turning over? The sweet spot in the hobby seems to be between 5 and 10. So whether you accomplish that with one filter or with 3 filters, if you're in that sweet spot, in other words, the total volume of the tank is being run through your filtration 5 to 10 times an hour. So to keep it simple, a 100-gallon tank, you should have 500 to 1,000 gallons per hour of water flowing, out through filtration and then back in. So how many filters do you need to have that happen? Well, you could probably accomplish it with 2 Fluval FX6s, even stuffed with media. Keep in mind that when you put media into filters, usually the gallon per hour number goes down because you're now creating resistance. So how many gallons per hour do you want to have occurring in your aquarium? Now that you've got that figured out, let's say it's 100 gallon and you want to have 700 to 800 gallons per hour. I suggest you put in filtration that's going to give you a rating of about 1,000 gallons per hour. Why? Because after you put in the media, your gallons per hour is going to slow down. Now, if you're on the high end of that and you're turning over a lot of water, that's usually a good idea for a very heavily stocked tank. The tank behind me here, this is a very heavily stocked tank. There are a lot of fish in it. Across from this tank is a 60 gallon that is very, very lightly stocked. And my 100 gallon, you would consider that probably a moderate or average or even lightly stocked tank by African cichlid standards. So keep in mind, how heavily am I going to stock the tank? If you're going to stock it very heavily, get closer to 10 times per hour on water turnover. If you're going to stock it lightly, you could probably get away with 5 times per hour and you'd do okay. Now also keep in mind that the amount of filtration, the size of the filtration, are you using small hang-on backs that you can reach to easily, and that's not going to necessarily stress you physically to work on them? Or are you going to use heavy canisters that are going to require some strength and leverage to move around? And if you're somebody who, let's say you're a smaller, lighter person, or let's say you have back issues, a large canister would not necessarily be recommended for you because you're going to have to be lugging that thing around. I would suggest considering larger hang-on back filters. They're easy to reach and easy to work with. If the filter is larger, you're going to have to work on it less often. If it's a smaller, more compact filter, you're going to have to get in there probably 3-4 times a month and make sure it's running right and not being clogged up. You also have ways of determining by looking at a filter whether it's the amount of outflow coming out of that filter, whether there's overflow, as in the case of a hang-on back. You can determine if you have, if it's time to actually work on it. So, for your particular application, get within 5 to 10 gallons, 5 to 10 times the total gallons of your aquarium. Whether you break that up between several filters or accomplish it with one, that's your call. I prefer several filters. That way you have backup and you can service one week and a couple weeks later service the other, so there's less shock going on. So if I wanted to get 700 gallons per hour, I would probably get 2 filters rated at 500 gallons per hour, and probably between the 2 of them stuffed with media, I'd probably end up at about 700 gallons an hour. That would be for, let's say, a 70-gallon tank. Okay, so get in that sweet spot and then ask yourself, how am I going to stock this? Am I going to stock it very heavily? If you are, get closer to the 10. If you're going to stock it lightly, get down near the 5, you'll be okay. How often do I want to work on that filter? You're willing to work on it on a very regular, almost weekly or once a month basis? Average size filters are fine. You want more time in between servicing? Get larger units, and they'll let you go for longer periods. And consider pre-filters. The pre-filters will do some of the heavy lifting, catch the detritus before it goes into the filters, like I have on my aquariums, and that'll give you a longer period between needing to service the filters. Okay, so take your gallons, multiply them times the number of times that you want that aquarium to turn over an hour, and then look for filters that will provide that after they're stuffed with media. I'd reduce the total gallons per hour by about 30 to 40% usually, sometimes as much as 50% after you put in the media. Fluval tends to rate their filters with media, but even then I think you do lose something when because over time they start to clog up a little bit. That's just normal. And last, if I could say this at the end of every video I've ever posted, I would go ahead and go back and add it to the hundreds of videos, and that is this. If you have a setup right now that doesn't fall within the criteria that I'm discussing here, that your fish look healthy, your aquarium water tests perfectly, and you've been doing that way for a long time, and the fish are doing great, then carry on. Keep doing. Don't change what you're doing because of some tip from somebody on YouTube. If what you're doing is working, keep doing what you're doing, okay? And what I'm giving you here are based on my personal experience, and what I've observed firsthand tends to work for me. What works for you, if it's working, I'd be reluctant to mess with it. Now, if you're going to go from 5 fish in a 70 gallon to 15 fish, watch a few videos and maybe make a few tweaks. You're probably going to need more water turnover. You're going to need more filtration. But if you're business as usual and your water is testing great and your fish look great, they're active, they're colorful, they respond to you, keep doing what you're doing. All right? What are your thoughts about filtration? What are the guidelines that you would suggest for somebody who's out shopping for a filter and they want to add it to, let's say, a 100-gallon tank? What tip would you give them? I want to hear about it in the comments below, and we'll talk about it some more this weekend at the Cichlids and Coffee live stream, Saturday, 10 a.m. Pacific. Hope to see you there, and thank you so much for tuning in. Be sure to hit that sub and bell, and that's all for me. Thank you.